Hey, hey, hey! I don't even know what I do. Hey, hey, hey. Maybe it should be like, good evening, YouTube. No, so my name's Mark. I do a thing called a NOTCAST, which is not a podcast, where I talk to my mobile phone for as long or as short I can be bothered whenever I feel like it, about pretty much whatever I want, including on occasion politics. This is episode 399 today. Is the 29th of July 2024. We're in the midst of a heat wave. Tomorrow, apparently, the British temperature is going to be 32, and I'm going to have to spend all that day walking around for work. And today, because it is a heat wave and it is far too warm, I am not going to be talking about an album or anything like that at all. Instead, I'm going to be doing one of my good old-fashioned once a month random record Russian roulette. And yes, this is a different bag. I have more than one tote bag. You'd be surprised. Also, I have a very good habit of just putting things down and forgetting where I've put them. I try to put everything in the same place all the time, but it doesn't always work. And I guess we'll just have to see how it happens. So, rules of the random record Russian roulette are a CD, a DVD, a book, a 7-inch, a 12-inch, possibly something else, as chosen by the 14-year-old who lives with me. And since he knows less about it, he's not tempted to bias it in any way and come up with anything which might be embarrassing, although inevitably he almost definitely will, because I've got some embarrassing stuff. Let's see what the first one is. This is a book. Yeah, this is a good one. This is The Keep by F. Paul Wilson, and this is the novelisation of one of my favourite films, my favourite Michael Mann film. And I listened to the soundtrack to this by Tangerine Dream on vinyl today. This film is an obscurity, and the book is not that easy to get either. So it's pretty much been written out of history. So Michael Mann, macho auteur who makes all of his films about men expressing their feelings through the medium of violence or theft and violence, and possibly with a side order of murder. All meaningful films about what it is to be a man in a man's world. The Keep is his strangest movie. It's his only movie that ventures vaguely into the not autobiographical, if that makes sense. Most of his films are very autobiographical. So I think Thief was based upon a book. For example, Ferrari was Heat. Probably. This is so most of his films don't have original screenplays. They're based on either books or autobiographies or something like that. This is based upon this book by F. Paul Wilson, and this book is absolutely fantastic. So, in the interest of full transparency, over the past year or so, I've recently got into collecting old movie novelizations. In the 80s and the 70s, especially with films like Jaws, Star Wars, things like that, there was a period when the novelisation was as much a piece of merchandising as a soundtrack album. Now, this was before Funko Pops and things like that. So, these days you can buy discless editions of films where you just put it on your shelf and then you watch it on streaming and there isn't actually a disc in there, which is ridiculous. In the 70s and 80s, movie merchandising, especially before Star Wars, came in the form of, maybe you could buy a car that James Bond had driven in a scale model by Mattel or Corgi. Maybe you could buy a novelisation of the film, because the film wasn't coming to VHS because VHS hadn't existed. If you wanted to see the film, you had to wait until it was re-released at the cinema, or you had to go and buy the sell-through VHS. I think ABBA, the movie, when that first came through on sell-through VHS, was something like £80. One of my friends got arrested for shoplifting that once in the 80s. And if I remember rightly, the security guard at HMV said, well, if you're going to steal big, which is, applaud it to ambition, I think it's fair to say. And then the next thing that you had is you either watched it on TV, you watched it when it came back to the cinema, or you rented a VHS from a VHS rental store like Blake's in Cottridge, which I frequented and spent many years of my life in on Friday nights, waiting to pick out what I was going to be watching. Sorry, I've got a minor cable issue here. So The Keep is a really good novelisation, although it isn't. It's actually the book that inspired the film. So it goes into more depth, and it has some really interesting stories in it, some really interesting approaches to the material. The film by Michael Mann is a glimpse of what the book of the film, or what the film, the book could have been, because Michael Mann didn't have final cut of the film. The final cut of the film has something like 40 minutes taken out of it, a little bit of which, about 7 minutes, is restored for some television broadcasts. And the main guy that was doing the special effects for the film died before his main special effects had been done. So the final special effects and the final version of the film are sometimes, to use management speak, subprime or suboptimal. So there you are. This is a really fascinating book, because what it does is it expands and illuminates, I think, the motives of the characters and their behaviours. So, for example, in this, which, by the way, was published, and I think it's 1978, but let me quickly check. 1981. Right, so it was published in 1981. The film was released in 1983, so it was optioned and shot very quickly. So some of the additional plot lines that we have in this are, for example, about the nature of Galen, who is the character played by, I think, Scott Glenn in the film, who is the person that trapped the evil baddie, whose name I have temporarily forgotten because I can't remember everything. So, right, hang on, let me just quickly check. So we have a number of super baddies in this. We have Glaken, who is the long time, what's the word I'm thinking of here? Administrator, the Lando Calrissian of the keep. And inside the keep, those strange cross-shaped things which have been placed in there to keep a demonic spirit inside to prevent it from ruling the world. And the demonic spirit is part vampire, part demon, probably an imp. If you watch Help My House is Haunted, because every episode of Help My House is Haunted has an imp in it. And the demon itself, and this is where I'm going to have to pause it and find the name of the demon. Hang on. Excellent, got it. So the demon's name is Molasar. And Molasar is determined to be released from the keep so that he can take control of the world, but also is some kind of ancient weird vampire king who feels very strongly about his country, his Romanians being scooped up by the Nazis and taken into death camps and murdered. He then says actually what he needs to do is he needs to escape to protect his people and overthrow Hitler. So actually it's really interesting, because if Molasar had won, then we would have a new demon overlord, but also he would have killed Hitler. So there you are. Really interesting the way that this expands the mythology. Those bits would really enrich the film if they were in the film, but they're not. This also, however, I'm afraid to say, breaks the cardinal rule. And the cardinal rule is, if your book has a map in it, it's probably fantasy, because otherwise everybody knows where everything is. And this map looks suspiciously like the set of the film. So that's the keep, £1.95. Whilst I have also said that I'm at the moment buying lots and lots of old movie novelizations from my childhood. So when I was a kid, and films were the first thing that ever made sense to me when I was a kid, because in films they had a narrative, and you got the girl and killed the baddies and saved the entire planet. That was what attracted me to films, because especially when I was about 10, 9, for example, life was just a bunch of stuff that had no plot. There was no narrative, there was no tale around it. It was, well, you wake up and you eat and you go to school and you come back and you eat and you watch TV and you get excited about tomorrow's world. You read the Guinness Book of World Records around the world's biggest computer, and then you go to bed and you do it again and again and again and again. And there was a lot of repetition in that, and there was a lot of boredom, and there wasn't much point. It was like, what's the point? I get up, I do stuff, I go to bed, and then I repeat it the next day, except I'm a day older. Whereas as an adult, obviously you have a narrative in your life generally beyond the maintenance of the physical body, around being able to fulfill your desires or ambitions, or buy records, or, watch Formula One, or whatever it is that you want to do. Whereas as a kid, my life didn't really have a plot. It was a really bad sitcom where nothing really happened and there was no resolution. So that's where films really, really made sense to me, because I was able to live in a world where, firstly, The bad guys were defeated. Everyone found true love. The soundtrack was probably by Harold Faltermeyer or Tangerine Dream, and therefore absolutely banging. And that's why I loved films. And film novelizations alongside soundtrack albums were the first thing that I really got into collecting. And as I grew older, I had that thing where you go through a phase and you kind of think, oh, right, okay, so maybe I've grown out of that. And what I've realised is some phases I've grown out of. So, grown out of collecting comic books or graphic novels as they're now known. I still have about 14 of them. But what I haven't done is I thought I'd grown out of movie novelizations. As I got older, I realised, no, actually, that's part of my story. It's a big part of my story. And I had a lot of movie novelizations, and I decided I was going to buy them back again. Apparently, when David Bowie retired, he spent a lot of time on eBay buying things he either wanted as a kid or had as a kid, but had lost as he became an adult over the years. And so therefore, I'm basically doing a Bowie and buying the things that I wanted when I was a kid, including shelves and shelves of movie novelizations, and slowly reading my way through them, because these books are the perfect size to fit in a set of gig trousers behind a zippable pocket. So if you're on a train going from a gig there and back, you can read a movie novelization on the way. And I went to a website called worldofbooks.com, which has a 4 for £10 deal on at the moment, and therefore spent a lot of money and got a lot of books recently, something like 100 books or thereabouts, which, by the way, you can't have enough books. Despite what anyone tells you, you absolutely can't, and that is a theory I am testing to destruction with the amount of books that there are in this house, despite the fact that I normally talk about CDs. Well, I wasn't expecting to pull this out and then to spend 10 minutes talking about 80 movie novelizations. But that's one of the great things about this, is you never know what you're going to get. And then the next thing I'm going to get is a DVD. Here it is, Lars von Trier's Melancholia. And he is an unusual filmmaker, and not one that I like, but one that I admire. And his films are very, not depressing, but they're bloody weird. Actually, I think he made Mother. Maybe he didn't make Mother, but he made Nympho, didn't he? And Antichrist and things like that. And this is a really interesting, strange, unusual, dark film about a lavish wedding ceremony where things go a little bit weird and a little bit wrong. And to be honest, the first time I saw it, it reminded me a lot of a David Lynch movie made in Europe. So you follow the narrative of the film, well, more correctly, you follow the emotional temperature and feel of the film, but you don't necessarily understand everything that's going on, even in its most obvious movies. So therefore, I need to watch this again before I come to a full conclusion about what I actually think about it. But I have a category where it comes to films. There are 3 categories of films that I buy. 1, burners. So I watch once, no, I'm not going to watch it twice, normally don't pay very much money for it, and then I'm going to trade it into CEX or give it to a charity shop. Second ones are where I'm curious. Maybe the disc is the only way I'm going to get a chance to see the film, but maybe I'm really interested in the extra features. And it's one of those films where you kind of go, right, I'm going to go in and I'm going to see it, and I might love it and I might not love it. And for films like that, I'm thinking, for example, Ramiro's The Crazies. There's a film called Another Earth, which is really good, about another Earth that just suddenly appears in the sky. Things like, Investigation of a Citizen Under Suspicion, The Conformist, things like that. Weird movies that generally don't kind of turn up except on disc form, that I'm prepared to invest in, often ones with boutique releases. So it's on 88, Arrow, Criterion. They're normally worth a look. This one is on, I think, BFI. No, it's on Artificial Eye, which is a good label as well. And I'd recommend at least investigating this. So, just to read what happens on the back, by the way. The mysterious planet Melancholia emerges from behind the sun and appears to be headed on an apocalyptic collision course with the Earth during a wedding ceremony. So that sounds pretty high concept to me. And whatever drugs they're on, I'm interested in having some of those. So I'm going to watch that again and see what I think, because that could be one of those films that's about the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Especially considering what happened a few years ago. It did feel like it was the end of the world, and yet I didn't feel fine about it at all. It felt kind of boring, and kind of, I thought that, I'm tired of unprecedented times. I want precedented times, thank you. And so the next one that comes out, this is a Blu-ray. This is Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, a film by Paul Schrader. This is a Criterion Collection deluxe edition Blu-ray. I bought this from the CEX in Portsmouth Harbour, or Portsmouth, about 3 years ago, because sometimes I have to go to Portsmouth and sometimes I have long waits at Portsmouth because I have a 19-year-old and I get to spend some time with him. And Portsmouth is one of the places that I get to see him. And so I was waiting at the station and I went to the CEX and I saw Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters by Paul Schrader there at the DVD store, and I had some CEX credits. So I bought it. I think this is a strong film. It has a soundtrack by Philip Glass. I have the soundtrack album downstairs. I'm a huge fan of Philip Glass's soundtrack work, although it is, like some artists, you can just hear it, you go, Philip Glass, innit? And that's the bit that I really hate, is when it starts to arpeggiate, as the much lost Victor Lewis Smith had on one of his radio shows. This is a film about the life and death of a Japanese author and playwright, Yukio Mishima, who has the inner turmoil of having lived in a society that has been defeated post the Second World War. And for a society that apparently has a great credence and importance attached to things like honour, dignity and integrity, and no surrender, to then have to surrender to America at the end of the Second World War was apparently a great insult to some people's national character and understanding of the bit that forms the cornerstone of their identity, and so therefore attempted to overthrow the government to restore honour back to Japan, but failed, and therefore committed public seppuku, which I think is some form of ritual disembowelment and suicide and shame. It's a very manly, macho film. So when I was talking earlier about Michael Mann making films about men who express their feelings through violence and murder, this is a film that follows some of the same things about the gap between public and private identity and the perception around who you have to be, and the need and the compulsion for duty and so on and so forth. So a very bold, brave film, perhaps one that I wasn't expecting to see. And I think I saw it when it was on television in about 1987, 1988. Thought it was really good, but I didn't get it at all because I was 15. And now that I'm past 50, I now possibly get it a little more. As with all the Criterion editions, this is beautifully, sumptuously packaged in gold foil here. The Blu-ray has a veritable boatload of extras. Let's quickly read off the back. A rejected narration, an actual narration, commentary, interviews, audio interviews, an excerpt with Mishima talking about himself, a documentary from 1985, and an essay about the film's censorship in Japan, because it depicted ideas and concepts which weren't necessarily popular in that country. And let's just quickly check. Here is the receipt. Commercial Road, Portsmouth, 3rd of January 2022. And that was £22. So my memory is roughly correct. I need to see that film more often, actually. So it's due a rewatch. Any film that I like, I try to watch several times to really see if I can, really squeeze all the juice out of the pips. If you remember the film The Great Escape with Richard Attenborough making a cup of tea, and he's made about 40 cups of tea out of this tea bag. That's how I feel with the movie. A movie is an investment of time, money, love. If I'm going to pay £22 for something, that's a considerable chunk of my time and my disposable income. Not that I have a huge amount of that, so I'm going to make the most of it. And I'm sat there going, if it's going to cost me more in time to earn than it is for me to enjoy, I'm probably not going to do it. So there's Mishima for you. A good choice, actually. One I wasn't expecting. Right, so let's see what we've got here. I think, 7-inch. Okay, so this is Frightened Rabbit. And these are the 3 7-inches that were sold as a bundle with the recent 10th anniversary repressing of, I think, the Pedestrian Verse album. So these are 7-inch singles. That's Backyard Skulls there. This one here is the Woodpile, backed with Today's Cross, and then we have Late Night Death March here, and these are sealed on the grounds that I haven't actually needed to open the 7 inches. But I love this band dearly. I came to them very late in my life, or more correctly, very late in their life. So I think, as I've said before, I heard a band called Master System on YouTube playing a song, the Notes on a Life Not Quite Lived. Master System featured Justin Lockie from the Editors, and also Grant and Scott from a band called Frightened Rabbit. And I heard this song and I was like, these bands are great. Where have they been? And then I discovered that that band hadn't been anywhere. They featured the singer and drummer from the great Frightened Rabbit, and Grant from Frightened Rabbit now plays drums in one of my very favourite bands, the Twilight Sads. And that's because Scott from Frightened Rabbit died in May 2018, and I had a life-changing experience watching the Twilight Sads in June 2018, where they played Frightened Rabbit's Keep Yourself Warm live at the Leeds Brood Now, which I'm not going to talk about right now because I think that is too important to talk about just randomly in a random record Russian roulette moment. It was one of those moments where you are in your life and suddenly you realize that you have to change direction of what you're doing, and you have to straighten up and fly right, to be boring, or to change the way in which you're living and to be the person you want to be and not the person you have to be. So these 3 singles are 45s, 7 inches. They weren't released at the time, that I think have been reissued and repressed as proper 7-inch singles. I think they're only downloads, and they were sold as a 3 7-inch bundle when Pedestrian Verse was repressed last year, so I ordered that, and I'm very glad that I have them. And I haven't opened the seal on the 7 inches on the grounds that I know all the songs inside out anyway. They're very, very good, and well, I could speak for years about that band and how I wish I'd got into them sooner, but I won't, because I won't. Right, 2 more. We have a CD. Let's see what the CD is. Frank Turner, Undefeated. Excellent. This is a good choice. Good choice, dude. Undefeated is the most recent studio album by Frank Turner. Frank Turner was friends with Scott from Frightened Rabbit, and I got into Frank Turner in 2009, 2010, I think, when the Reading Festival was broadcast on BBC Three. They showed his live set. I heard songs like Photosynthesis, Substitute, possibly The Road, I think maybe came out around about that time. It was the 3rd album, which is, God, I've forgotten now. I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. But he's done about 14 albums, and he's playing other songs off that. And I heard the live show, or watched the live show on BBC Three, and I was like, this is great. So to me, Frank Turner is the British equivalent of Bruce Springsteen, except not quite so popular. He tours like a dog, writes great songs, fiercely prolific. Never more than a couple of years away from an album, and this is his most recent one, which I have seen him play live twice. So I saw him play on the 4th of May this year at Birmingham as part of his 24-hour record-breaking tour to play 15 shows in 15 cities in 24 hours. He got the world record, and I was part of that. Played to about 2,500 people during that tour, which was over in a day. Did a 8-song acoustic set. I took my brother along. Really good, really enjoyed it, really nice. And if I hadn't gone to that, I would have probably seen Jim Bob in Birmingham. The other time that I saw him was 2 weeks ago at Prism in Kingston, playing a 16-song acoustic set for Banquet Records, or as it's called, Franquet Records, where I bought the special edition splatter multicoloured blue white vinyl version, got a free gig ticket, and put the album a bit further up the charts. Undefeated is a good record, but it's only been out for 3 months, 2 months, so I haven't got deep into it yet. I'm working on that. It's got a couple of songs I really like. It's got a couple of songs that don't quite hit it for me. International Hide and Seek Champions, about DB Cooper, is really good. I really enjoy that. No Thank You for the Music. Letters is great. Pandemic PTSD is a fabulous song title. Girl from the Record Shop is pretty good. Really reminds me of a song I wrote when I was about 18 called I'm in Love with a Girl from Rockaboom That Doesn't Know I Exist. She doesn't work there anymore because I wrote that song 33 years ago. She's probably about my age now, if not actually a little bit older. And we've got, Never Mind the Back Problems and all that type of stuff. There's many, many editions of this album. This is the version, this is the Beg Broke edition, which you could only buy on CD from Frank's website. This features the band demos of the album in a 2 CD set with a photograph that's taken on, I think it's called a linotype system, which is like a very early form of photography, which kind of shot it onto kind of like a steel plate. And there you are. I like this record. I recommend giving Frank a listen if you get a chance. Again, this boy of mine is really knocking it out of the park today. Some great choices. Will Mark ever shut up? Well, soon, because this is the last one I'm pulling out. And this is, yes, I was hoping we'd get to this at some point. I was thinking about this band earlier, and I was thinking, I haven't talked about this band much. Public Service Broadcasting, The Race for Space. This is a magnificent record. They're a great band, actually. I love them to bits. They were introduced to me about 10 years ago by my brother's then girlfriend, who said, I think you might like these. I think they're too good for Graham, is what she said. And I was like, ooh, I'm in. I like that. You know that gif of the guy that goes, like the baseball commentator or something. I was like, right, that's it, I'm in. Public Service Broadcasting are fabulous, and I'm seeing them soon on their upcoming tour for their next album, which I think is called The Last Flight. I should know what it's called, I've ordered it. And I'm seeing them at an in-store to promote it. This album is about the race for space. So all of their albums are concept albums. Now that sounds very prog rock, very wanky. Hear me out here, kids. All of their albums have ideas behind them, and they take the name Public Service Broadcasting by licensing soundtracks for public service information announcements, such as The Spirit of Dark and Lonely Water, one about the night mail, for example, and then take samples from documentaries and use those effectively to replace lyrics by creating them in such a way as to tell a story about society and technology. Really, really interesting. Probably, in my opinion, the spiritual successors to Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk's albums are all about man, nature, technology, and the space in between that. Public Service Broadcasting records are generally all about the nature that man has with civilization and technology around it, backed with some really quite enjoyable instrumental music that has all the concepts of, or more correctly, all the structure of standard songwriting, verse, chorus, lyrics, break, middle eight, etc., but in the concept of playing them instrumentally. So I really, really enjoy them, and it just adds an extra layer onto them. So The Race for Space as an album is about the race for space between two rival nations. So following the Second World War, back in 1939 to 19... Well, actually, do you know what? I might regret taking this out. The shrink wraps will open up the gatefold because I've never actually opened the gatefold on this. So taking its cue from the Second World War. And the Second World War, who won the Second World War, effectively defined who was going to go to space first. So the Americans, perhaps don't like advertising this a huge amount, gave forms of asylum to former German scientists that specialised in air technology. People that invented things like the V-1 and V-2 bombers and the Junkers Ju-77 or the Ju-87 Stuka or whatever it is. There are 2 Stukas left in the world. One, I think, is in somewhere like Chicago. The other one is in the Cosford Air Museum in England, and you can go visit it. In fact, if I remember correctly, one of my mum's first memories is of a Ju-87 doing a death dive. So they had an intake at the front of the Ju-87 that made that noise that that goes... I don't even know why I did that, but I'm beyond embarrassment now, as you've probably worked out. And then kind of the memory stuck with her forever, because you kind of associate that sound with the sound of death from above, not the band, but from death from above. So, for example, V2s, which were rockets which could fly into London and would run out of fuel, and they were packed with just enough fuel to get somewhere near London, and then they'd and blow up some houses, or maybe if you were really unlucky, a pond. There's a huge bomb crater where I work, actually, from where the Germans dropped a load of bombs onto a fake city. So there's what Britain used to do, especially during the Battle of Britain, when Britain was being put technically bombed to fuck, is that Britain would switch all the lights off, and then put what looked like lights in the days before GPS, what looked like lights and rows and streets and houses in fields, and the Germans would bomb the fields. And then there's a massive kind of bomb crater from where a huge bomb blew up a random field, which happens to be in the grounds of where I now work. Really interesting stuff. Anyway, got distracted. Germany lost the war. Boozer Hitler, terrible man, of course. And the Americans got to the technology sites, and then got the German air technologists and said, you can work for us. You can make space rockets. You can put us on the moon, which is exactly what they did. And so there was a race between the America and Russia, as symbolized in the two sides of this gatefold LP, the race for space. So Russia got to space first. That is Sputnik, to quote the great blind prospector Stinky Pete from Toy Story 2. They don't call me Stinky Pete for nothing. Sputnik, which was the first man-made object to get into space, that was launched by the Russians. But the first person to put a man on the moon in 1969 was Das Americans. Hello. And despite what the well-known documentary Iron Sky tells you, there is not actually a Nazi moon base with clones of Hitler on there. Otherwise, it'd be called something else, wouldn't it? This is a fabulous album, 40 minutes of concept music about man going to space, and so with titles like The Race for Space, Gagarin, First Fire in the Cockpit, which I think is the Saturn 7 or Saturn 5 fire, EVA, which is extravehicular activity, i.e. going out on a moonwalk, the other side of the moon, the dark side of the moon, but there is no dark side, it's all dark. Valentina, which I think was the name of either the first female dog or the first woman in space. Go, which is around a countdown and is their best song live, apparently. And then Tomorrow. Lovely, brilliant album. I love this to bits. Really love this band. Strongly recommend you listen to them and think as highly of them as I do, because if you don't, you could be missing out. This could be your new favourite band. And if you end up buying albums because I put pictures of them on Instagram or anything, or Twitter, as per what Simon in America has told me recently, don't send me the bill. I'm just telling you what I'm listening to. I'm not suggesting you buy it. But if it makes you buy stuff and find music you love, great, crack on, have a lovely time. So that is Public Service Broadcasting's Race for Space. And there is a photograph of from one spacecraft of the International Space Station, which I think was called Starlab or something, and then photographs of the various people that played on the record, graphics of re-entry through space and so on and so forth, and a photograph there of one of the space rockets being constructed. That might actually be, no, it isn't an ICBM. That's a shot from the top of the warehouse at Cape Canaveral when they construct and put together the spaceships in the days when you'd sit on a giant ball of flame and you'd get sent into space and hope that everything would work out okay. So that is a more exciting than normal random record Russian roulette poll, and I'm really grateful and happy that some great choices came out there from my 14-year-old. Excellent choices, really good. I'm gonna have to bribe him with an ice lol. So thank you very much if you've watched all of this for 34 minutes of me talking about some random crap from my shelves. Next episode is episode 400. I have some plans for that, but I can't tell you what they are in case they don't work, because then that would spoil the surprise. One of the things that I do like is the fact that when I put something up, you don't quite know what it's going to be until it turns up, and then it turns up and you're like, brilliant, or oh God, he's talking about that band again. I don't know. But I have plans for number 400, which probably won't pull off in time to interview a special guest at an unusual location. And if I can't get it for number 400, I'll get it for some other time. But in the meantime, just remember, all crabs really are beautiful, and stay beautiful, and I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. As what is his name? Not Tommy Vance, the other guy, Alan Fluff Freeman, said, if you love someone, don't forget to tell them before it's too late. So, in the spirit of communicating in a way to my cats, Mog, Price and Tinker, I love you guys. Keep purring. Right, and for those of you who've made it all the way to the end, thanks for watching. I'll see you some other time. Bye.